So, welcome to another episode of Tennis for Essentially Sports.
hmm
We've got a very special guest for you, tennis fanatics, especially today. Um, Dmitry Tursunov has taken the time to join us. And for those of you who do not know him, he's had a stellar ATP career himself. And on top of that, right now, is um, pretty famous for his partnerships with elite WTA players high up in the rankings. So, thanks Dimitri for taking the time out to join. How are you doing? Where are you right now? Are you in Indian Wells? Are you in Miami?
No, no, no. I'm helping a player. She's just outside of the rankings to get into those tournaments. She's not able to get into quali, so she's about 160. And Lee. So she was one. She was top 50 at one point, but that was kind of a brief time that she spent there. So now she's trying to get back into top 100, and so I'm trying to help her with that. And um yeah, so she's not in Indian Wells, she's not in Miami, so we're just practicing on clay courts. Maybe she'll get into qualifying of Charleston 500. So it's a different type of project. It's a you know um I feel like it's an interesting puzzle to solve.
Is this a short-term project, or are you gonna stick around with her for the entire year?
Well, we're not sure yet, so we're kind of looking at it. Both of us are looking. Um, I'm definitely not a coach for everyone, and so yeah, so it. She's kind of in a ranking position where she's not really earning a lot of money. She's not really, she's not really playing the big tournaments, main draws. So and I think right now, I don't know if many people know this, but ITF, which is 100,000 or 75,000. So those are the tournaments where she's in the main draw. Yeah, the prize money is pretty abysmal. So it's it's a tough proposition. To have a full time coach and be able to afford a lot of things. So we're not sure how long that partnership may last, but um, obviously my job is to get her there as fast as possible. Not take too long. But yeah, I think both of us are trying to figure out how long this is gonna, like, if she likes the way I'm working, if I feel like I can help her, because you know if I can't help her in any way, and then for 1 year I'm just gonna travel and she's not gonna move anywhere in the rankings, then what is the point of having me around as a coach? So I think there has to be some sort of improvement, and she has to feel that there is an improvement, you know not just me saying like, oh yeah, you're doing better, but she needs to feel that, yeah, I'm getting better. This person is helping me, so I'm gonna keep him around.
That's an interesting point you made about her not getting paid enough on the ITF tour. I'd like to touch upon that, but before that, I'd like to wind the clock a little bit and talk about your career and where you began your journey as well. Um, you obviously left your hometown at around 12 and a half years, if I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
and so by then you had already decided that you would be taking tennis seriously. So when was the earliest memory of yours when you came across tennis, and why did you pick that sport?
Well, um, uh, from what I'm told, when I was little, so my older brother and my father would go to practices, and I would just chase them. So I would go with them, and I think my father realized that I have a talent for it, and so then my training became more serious, and that was fairly early on. So probably around 5, I was already practicing. Um, so yeah, then that period of my life, I think it was just really, tennis was kind of the only thing that was in my life. So I think there was just no other. I couldn't even think of if there's anything else that I could be doing. I think it was just, I think when I was probably around 8 or 9, I just I knew that I was going to be a tennis player. So that wasn't really a question of whether I wanted it or didn't want it. It was just, I think it was always in my life, um, so so I think it was more of an assumption that I was going to be a tennis player, and I was good at it. So I think that when you're good at something, you progress to another stage and to another stage, and um, I think if I was bad in the juniors, then probably I would have stopped much earlier, and I probably would have picked something else up, right? Like maybe I would have been an architect, or maybe I would have been a teacher. I don't know, but the point is yeah, because I was good at tennis in juniors, so that gave a logical continuation to go into on the pro circuit, and so that was, um, I think in a way it's a blessing and it's a curse, because if you don't really enjoy it, then it's a curse, because like what else can you do, because you've devoted so much of your life to it. But it's a blessing because if you're talented and you're doing it, then things just kind of line up well for you. um,
How has it been for you? Has it been a blessing or a curse?
um, I think, well, there's a long period in my younger years when I really didn't like it, and but at the same time, I was not really in position to make that decision. So my dad was obviously very into my tennis. I think he was very passionate about my tennis. Um, I've never really figured out why. I mean, potentially it could be because he was trying to, um, part of him was living vicariously through me. But there's also a large part of it is he felt that was a good way for me to become someone, which happened. We could argue, could I have been better? Could I have been worse? But the point is that I think that if it wasn't for his persistence, I'm not sure would I have been um, a better player or a worse player. So it's very hard to talk about it now, because we can't really go back and do it another way. So, but yeah, I feel like if I had more passion for it, um, then I would have probably had more success. Um, but that was more of a psychological part. So I think in retrospect, there's a lot of things that I feel are positive because I can translate it to someone else. So I think it helps me in coaching. So a lot of things that I felt that I didn't do right, I can actually correct it in someone else's career earlier. So if it took me 2 years to figure something out, I can help someone to figure it out in a month. And so I feel like that gives me a little bit more efficiency, because I when I can walk the walk, um, so when I say something, I say it because I've gone through it, I felt through it. Um, so I have more conviction when I say something.
And how are you enjoying the coaching transition from? I mean, do you enjoy being a player more, or do you enjoy being a coach more? Because the traveling bit, I think, is pretty much similar because
Yeah.
you're traveling, um, just as much as you were as a player, probably a little bit less. But how has it been as a coach, and how are you taking it? And has it been as intense as it was when you were a player back on the tour, or has it been a little bit more mellowed down?
Um, well, I would almost say that traveling is actually, I'm making more traveling now than I do more traveling than when I played, because when the player is not playing a tournament, then she's training at home, and so with everyone who I've worked with, I actually had to move. So I had to spend the weeks of practice where the player is, which is a quite big difference to when I was playing. A lot of times, I as a player had to travel to the coach. Um, And nowadays, I think the newer generation likes to be more comfortable in. And sometimes I make that decision not because I enjoy moving to a different location, but because I feel that I'd rather player become more comfortable, spend a little bit more time at home so that they don't get homesick, because I really don't want to deal with the whining of, like, oh, I miss home, I miss my bed, during the tournament. So I'm like, okay, I'll I'll sacrifice my comfort, for the comfort of the player, so that they can stay where they like to stay for a period of a certain period of during the season. But then I don't want to hear this, like, I want to go home, because listen, you're home a lot more than I was when I was a player. And so I feel like I'm trying to have some of that sacrifice in terms of traveling, and just for the benefit of the player. But in terms of intensity, I actually, I like coaching more. I enjoy it more than I enjoy playing. I enjoy helping someone else more than um, than I enjoyed playing, I think. I do like to get results. I mean, I like to have
Mm.
success. So if you're successful as a coach, it's you know, if your player is successful, if your player is winning, then you as a player, of course, get the benefit of that as well. Um, so yeah, but I think I like helping more. I feel like that's more constructive. I feel like competing was more destructive in a way. Um, at least that's how I interpret it. I interpreted a little bit more of a destruction, this kind of more of a destruction. Here, I'm helping someone, I'm building someone's game. I'm trying to help them to figure out a way how to put things together. So it's kind of like building a puzzle together.
How does the coach player dynamic work exactly? Because you spoke about the whining of the players. Most of the times, you're probably dealing with people who are very early in their careers and they're not able to deal with the mental pressure, or cope up with the kind of intensity the tour has. So, is it a 9 to 5 job, or are you more of a parent to the player, or how does that dynamic work? Are you probably working round the clock with them? So because you're traveling together, obviously, how is that dynamic and relationship with a coach and player? Give us some insight into that.
So I feel like with the younger players, um, they need that. Um, they need more aspects, not just the coaching part, but also the parenting part, or just learning how to deal with things and learning how to. It's almost like there's always going to be some issues going to always arise, but it's how you look at it that's going to determine the severity of it. So you can think of you know your lost baggage as a problem that where you default from the tournament, or you just like say, okay, like, well, I lost my luggage, but then okay, let's go to the store and let's go buy some stuff. Maybe take some rackets with you on a plane, so that if your luggage gets lost, at least you have some rackets to hit with. So it's just solving logistics, and a lot of the times it's kind of funny, but um, a lot of players are like giant babies with when it comes to just solving just regular life issues. And um, there's a reason for that as well, because from early age they either have parents taking care of them, or there's agents now that sign kids when they're 11 and 12. I mean, I don't know, soon the agents will be waiting at the um, at the um, maternity ward, just waiting for the for the baby to come out, just so they can sign right away. So a lot of times, things that the normal person that goes to school and then goes to college and then goes to work, they learn how to handle some of these things on their own, because they don't have a secretary in a way, or someone to take care of their affairs. So yeah, so a lot of times you're helping with absolutely mundane things, um, but it's just trying to help them navigate that growing up period. And I feel like the younger players need a lot more guidance, even though they feel sometimes or they act as if they're old. But in a sense where like in the US, you can be at 16, you can start driving the car. Um, so you feel like an adult. You can go anywhere you want to, but then your parents can ground you until you're 18, or you live with your parents when you're 35. So that maturity uh, is not necessarily on having the freedom to get in the car and drive somewhere, but maturity is how you're able to handle your life, or your problems in your life. And so yeah, so there's a bit of so that's, a lot of times there's a disconnect in that, so you can have a 16-year-old who can be top 50, but then she might not know how to tie her shoelaces on her own. I'm obviously exaggerating, but yeah, so it's kind of a strange dynamic as well, because a lot of times it's a 20-year-old or 16-year-old who is hiring, so they're the ones who are paying your salary, but you're the adult in the relationship. And Yeah, so it's definitely can get very messy, and it does get messy a lot on tour, and that's why a lot of times the coaches are less of a coach, more of a friend, or more of a, could be more of a babysitter, or it could be more of someone just who's a fun person to be around. So it's almost like a player makes a decision. A lot of times they make them subconsciously, but if a coach comes in and he's too critical, then the player might not enjoy that. So they're like, okay, well, this is, I don't want that. Like, I'm not paying someone to make me feel bad about myself. I'm paying someone to make me feel good about myself. And so sometimes they'll hire people that have absolutely no business of of doing what they're hired to do. But that's I think that's, there's always going to be a mess like that when the dynamic of a younger person who's not quite um, hasn't had enough experience in life. Yes, they have a lot of experience on the court. They've competed a lot. They're very competitive. They're very self-aware. The egos are big, but yet they're still young, and they actually have very little experience outside of the court. So yeah, this dynamic can be very very difficult to navigate for sure.
Talking about big egos, we've got a super match coming up later tonight at Indian Wells between Emma Raducanu and Aryna Sabalenka, both of whom you've had partnerships with. Um, how do you see these two players right now from, let's say, a couple of years ago? Aryna obviously has absolutely cemented her spot at the top of the WTA rankings, whereas Emma obviously coming back from a couple of surgeries and still trying to find her foot. So, how do you think this match is going to play up today? And more importantly, how do you see the season playing out for both these players?
Um, well, I think both of them are at different stages of their career as well. So
Mm.
Aryna has gone through the development stage, um, and you know, I think she's also very confident in her place in the rankings. Um,
Mm.
so knowing that you belong there and being there, but feeling like you don't belong is a completely different mindset. So I think Arena's obviously older, so she's had a little bit more experience. She's bigger, stronger. So in that sense, she has certain weapons that she can rely on, and she doesn't need to be so meticulous with them either. She has the size that she can rely on. So it's kind of like in boxing there's a lot of these different weight categories, but in tennis it doesn't matter, right? Like you can be a heavyweight and then you can be a lightweight, but you guys are competing in the same sort of ring. So that presents a very big problem. So it's kind of a David versus Goliath thing, and so I think in that regard, if both of them are at the top of their potential, you know Emma would have to rely a lot more on her wits and rely on her ability to get Aryna out of her strike zones, out of her comfort zone. And I think that it would be a little bit harder for someone with a petite size to outpower, because when the ball comes in at 100 miles an hour and hits your racket, it's 100 miles an hour. So for Aryna, 100 miles, and for Emma is going to be two different things. So yeah, so I think in that sense, Aryna definitely has a lot of advantages. She's she's won enough matches to believe that she belongs there. She knows that she belongs at the top of her game, at the top of the game. She's a lot. I feel like she's more advanced in understanding herself, her own game better than Emma does. So she, when she goes for her shots, she believes in those shots and she understands like why she's going for them. She already has gone through enough of those shots to understand that she's not second guessing herself as much. Let's put it this way. Um, and I think coming back from injuries, of course, that's a difficult process. But you also got to start looking at at Wozniacki coming back, at Svitolina coming back, at Kerber coming back. They haven't been injured, but they've been out of tennis. And so they're coming back. But the difference with them coming back and Emma coming back is they're coming back to a place where they've already been. So they already understand a lot more about the game and about their own game than Emma does. So I think this is where Emma is struggling, because she's trying to get back somewhere where hasn't really been too long. Like she's gotten to top 10 because she had one magnificent result, but for her to say that she's top 10, she had to back it up with a lot more consistency than she had. So so this is, I think, Emma's trying to get back into that. She was in that territory once, but she hasn't really, she hasn't been there long enough to really understand what it takes to be there day in and day out. And so a lot of these girls that I've mentioned, they're coming back to where they were. So someone like Pliskova can be out of the top 100, but then, all of a sudden connect and have a couple of good results, and then she's back. And a lot of these players, they perform well in the big events. And for some players, big events is like, it's like it is like too much of a high C, so you could have Kerber beating Kudermetova, and you would think like it's such a mismatch, but ultimately, one just performs much better in these big events and under pressure than the other one.
That's an amazing insight into Emma's kind of mentality right now, and Aryna's as well. And probably she does lack a lot of experience of being there. But an interesting point you made about these mothers coming back, making a big comeback. Wozniacki, Kerber, we got Svitolina, who had a spectacular ending to the last season as well. We got Naomi Osaka as well, who's coming back from a maternity leave. What do you think is the biggest challenge after a childbirth? Because except for Kim Clijsters, nobody has won a slam after becoming a mother, not even Serena for that matter. So, what does it take to? I mean, what is the biggest and toughest challenge for them? Do you think the priorities change? Do you think family becomes a big side, big piece of cake, or rather chunk of time that is taking up in the day-to-day routines, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, I definitely haven't been a mother, so I, I can only kind of have an intelligent guess of some sort, but I'm sure all of these things have effect, right? It's a different priority. A mother's love is sort of it's its own like um, it's something that I guess is hard for us to understand. It's you know
Hmm.
the priority definitely shifts, um, but I still feel like these girls are still have that competitive drive, and so
Hmm.
I think it takes a lot more the micromanaging of the time and the logistics. Okay, how do I have my kid, but who's going to watch him when I'm playing a match? Like, what if the kid cries? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's just a lot of these like little things that have to be taken care of, but obviously you have a nanny traveling with you, or you have some sort of help, so you have to delegate it to another person to take care of that. um, I think physically it's definitely difficult to get back. Your body changes, your hormone change. So how do you get back into the competitive state of mind when your body has changed quite significantly? Again, I've never
Hmm.
had to deal with this, not personally. I have never worked with someone who's been coming back from giving birth. Um, so I'm only guessing, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than just just popping the baby out and then just picking up the racket and going back to practice. So there has to be a certain period that the body has to recover from. I mean, from a very traumatic experience. I mean, I'm sure it's very stressful and so um, yeah, and I think also as life sort of happens to you, as you become more mature, you learn how to separate what's important, what's not important. So you I think you become a lot more efficient with your time and with your actions, so you don't waste your time doing things that don't really matter. And becoming a parent, I think it does change people in that sense, where they become a lot more responsible. They understand that there's a lot more responsibilities. They mature quicker because they have to, because they have to take care of uh, some little person who's entirely relying on you. So in that sense, I think the girls mature a little bit faster, and they have much better perception of um, um, the priorities, and maybe they don't even put as much pressure on themselves. Tennis is a part of their life, but it's only part. Whereas for an 18-year-old, that can be the only thing in their life and nothing else. So yeah, I think it can also give you a lot of benefits as well. But definitely, it's going to cost you a lot of money, in terms of logistics and hiring the right people, and that seems to be the difficult part.
Talking about motherhood, you've had a very, I mean, not a much intense one, but you had a partnership with Belinda Bencic,
Hmm.
who's currently going through the same phase as Kerber and Wozniacki. When do you expect? Are you in touch with her firstly, and when do you expect her to be back? And are you going to continue with her once she returns? How's that looking?
No, no, no. We stopped working together, and it's actually kind of interesting because her and Petra Kvitova, they're very good friends, and so they kind of like
Hmm.
um, they're kind of like they're safe friends as families, and so they're both are pregnant at the same time. From what I understand, Kvitova is also pregnant, right? At least that's what I heard. I don't know. So,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
um, and so, but no, we don't stay in touch too much. So I'm guessing that she's gonna give birth fairly soon. I think.
So a couple more questions before I let you go. I think you're busy anyway. So a couple more players whom I wanted to talk to you about was one is Simona Halep making her come back to Miami. What do you think about that? And do you think she could be in contention for some of the bigger titles for the rest of the year, or is it going to again, because it's been 17 months since her last competitive match. So how do you see her chart panning out?
Um, well, I think the main question is what she has been doing during the time. Has she been practicing? Has she not been practicing? So it's kind of hard to speculate. I think that if she's been practicing and she's been in good shape, I think it should not be an issue. As we see that with Svitolina, Kerber, Naomi, and everyone else who's been coming back, it hasn't been an issue to get back um, uh, as long as they're in good shape. As long as they play tennis, as long as their body basically doesn't break down every time they push it to the limit. So yeah, I think if she's physically fit and fine, then the game will get there fairly quick. I know she was working with Darren for a very long time, and then right after Darren, she switched coaches. She changed quite a few things in her life. So who she's going to be traveling with now, I'm not sure. To be honest, I think that she's mature enough of a player and old enough to not necessarily need a coach per se. Like she probably already knows how to practice. She knows what helps her, what doesn't help her. She might need some tactical advice here and there, but again, nothing too she's not a young player who's developing, who has to learn all these things from the beginning. So I don't really think that the coaching issue is going to be that big unless she wants to improve the game. Unless she wants to make some changes to the game, then you do need the coach, because how do as you get older, you have less and less time out there to try new things, and it gets a little scary, and that's why I think older players typically get very apprehensive about making changes, but ultimately you still need to make them, if you can want to continue to be on the top. And that's what Novak and Rafa and Roger has been doing a lot. Like, you could see them tinkering with their game. You could see they're trying to improve something. So that's a necessity if you want to continue to be ahead of the pack. So yeah, it's too many kind of unknown things. But yeah, like if she's physically fit, I feel like she should do just fine. Like, it's, with her, because she's not a big player, like in terms of physically, she's not a big player. Like, so she can't use her power, to shorten the points. So her game is based a lot on movement. She's kind of like a David Ferrer, or like, Diego Schwartzman, maybe a little bit. So, and those types of games, they're very, very heavily based on how motivated you are, because physically they're pushing themselves to the limit a lot more than let's say Serena would, right? Like, Serena could hit a 1-2 forehands, and then that would be it. With Simona, it's not going to be like that. So she has to first be motivated. First she has to be physically fit, but secondly also go out there and be motivated to push herself to the limit in order to win the match. So they're very energy. These types of players, they have very like high energy requirement. So they burn a lot more fuel to get from point A to point B than a big hitter, let's say. So but I'm guessing, like, she hasn't played in a while. She's got things to prove. So I'm guessing that the motivation part should be there as well. Otherwise, she wouldn't be coming back. So yeah, so I think she should do well. Like, I think she should have fairly similar runs like Angie does, and Alina. Though Alina did change her game a bit. So she's the Svitolina 2.0 versus where before she was a little bit. I felt like a little bit more passive. Now she's trying to be a bit more aggressive. So she's made some improvements on top of the fact that she came back.
That's very interesting. You spoke about the big three making some subtle changes as they've gone through in their careers. Rafa obviously is another player who's been struggling with his comeback. Where do you see him for the next, I don't know, a few months? Because probably they'll be his last few months, and will he be able to compete at the biggest stages, especially with the Olympics coming up? Or do you think it's going to be more of a Andy Murray kind of a slide into his fag end of the career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more like the Andy Murray type slide. And I feel like for a couple of reasons, because I feel, again, it comes down to their game style. So their game style requires a lot of energy, especially with Rafa, right? Like every shot that he goes for, it's like a full power. Um, so it's a so in some ways it's an inefficient type of game, and I mean, again, who am I to judge, right? Uh, but but if Roger had a way to shorten the points, um, Rafa, I feel like, in order to survive that, his problem is his body is not able to sustain that. If Novak can
Yeah,
sustain that type of game, Rafa cannot sustain it anymore. So he has to make some changes to shorten up the rallies, to mm, you know find a way how not to spend as much energy per point, uh, in order to have a legitimate chance. Um, and so, I don't know, again, but like men's game is a little bit different to women's, where you could have someone like Andy Murray, who's basically not leaving any stone unturned, and he's still struggling. He's still around 60.
yeah,
Um, and to be honest, I think Rafa had two or three comebacks from his injuries that were incredible. They were very similar to the returns that girls have. But if you look at it, everyone who was injured, there was a point, maybe like five. I don't remember exactly how long ago, but it's when Sasha Zverev became number 3 in the world. But you had Murray, Rafa, Roger, Nishikori, Berdych, Tsonga. Um,
yeah,
they were all injured. I think Raonic was also
yeah,
injured. So all of these guys, like,
yeah,
just they kind of got all injured at the same time. And if you look at it, not a single one got back other than Rafa. I mean, Roger also, had
yeah.
some good comebacks, and I think Novak was also injured at the time. Um, so he
Yeah.
wasn't playing. So
And
there was a period when, like, about 8 or 9 guys just kind of fell off the face of the earth, and and only 2 of them came back. 2 or 3 came back. Nishikori's still trying to come back, struggling. Wawrinka is kind of a shadow of himself. Um, so getting back onto the same level for a lot of these guys has been the biggest struggle. I mean, Dominic Thiem, it's kind of the same. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to be very, very tough for Rafa, especially with guys like Alcaraz, Shelton. I mean, there's a lot of guys who can really hurt him, and you know, and he needs to be on the top of his very, very energy draining type of game. And I don't know if
yeah,
he's going to be able to do that. But hopefully, I mean, I'm
you
sure
spoke
I'm sure
about the
everyone
youth.
wants to see him, but hopefully he'll be able to do it.
Absolutely, we're all looking forward to Rafa returning to, I don't know, probably the one last time at Roland Garros and probably even win it. But you spoke about the differences between the men's side of the tour and the women's side of the tour. Any other particular big differences that you've noticed, especially um, on the consistency front? Because now that the big three are kind of out of the scene, and we've got the the I don't know, the Yannick Sinners, the Alcarazes coming up. But on the women's side, whereas we've found some consistency with Rybakina, Swiatek, and Sabalenka capturing the top 3 spots. Um, do you think this is a new era unfolding for WTA and simultaneously for the ATP Tour as well? But two very different eras that might be unfolding. We'll probably just have people winning one slams or two slams on the ATP side, but probably on the WTA side, we might see a few more slams being accumulated by the top women. Or do you think it's going to be different?
Um, I mean, I think the WTA had some consistency the last couple of years. And I feel like almost, Raducanu has been holding her place in the rankings, but she hasn't really had a consistent season in the sense where she's getting a lot of these just health issues that they're not even related to fitness. So sometimes she has allergy or something else. So she withdraws from quite a few tournaments if you look at it. So she's been consistently ranked, but her I can't even say performances but she hasn't really been consistent. Like she so if Sabalenka plays, she plays. Sabalenka hasn't had like too many injuries. Like for sure she has some here and there, but she's adjusted her schedule a bit. But it's also easier to adjust the schedule when you're not going to lose in the first round of a slam. So of course a lot of the girls, like if you look at Indian Wells, I think before round of 32, at least half of the seeded players that were there are out before their supposed planned departure, right? And so if you're ranked 5 in the world and you lose in the first round of a tournament, then you have to you can't schedule less tournaments because you don't even know are you going to go far in them. So Sabalenka and Swiatek have been the most consistent in terms of they enter into a tournament, they know they're going to go far in it, and they do go far in it. So I think another couple of players is like Jessie Pegula has been pretty solid. But that might change also. She's pushing. She's 30 years old, so the question is how much motivation she's going to have. Ons might be having like a very tough year. So out of the players that I kind of that I can think of, Coco has been pretty solid. There's some few drops here and there in terms of like, okay, Australia, she exited fairly early for her rankings, but
Yeah.
in girls you see a lot of this, like a top 10, half of top 10 can be out before getting to round of 16s. So it happens, I think, a little less in men's, but it happened a lot less with the top 3, obviously, but now it happens a little bit more often, but not as much as on the girls tour. So I feel like, and a lot of times people say like, well, it's because the draw, it's such a good depth. Like, well, I feel like it's the lack of consistency of the players, so you can have one good result and then, for half a season, might be losing first round. And Yastremska is a good example of like she did really well at Australian Open and then hasn't been able to tie matches together. And so you can go through a lot of names and look at them, and they'll have a win of 500, but then they might not do well the next couple of weeks. And so with guys, I feel like there's a little less of that. And I'd love to attribute it to sexism, but it's unfortunately it's not. Like we can, if you look at the data, it shows that there's a lot more inconsistency in results on WTA. Now, why that is, I mean, you can speculate, but yeah, I feel like on men's tour there's just a lot more consistent top players. So top 30 typically performs well. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I think that Coco is going to be pretty solid for the next few years. Like I don't foresee any changes in her rankings. I'm trying to think. Like I can't think off the top of my head who's in top 10 right now. So Zhang, I think, is gonna.
It's
Huh?
interesting that you spoke about Coco because despite the U.S. Open victory, it's kind of been a very mediocre year for her until now. She obviously parted ways with her coach Pere Riba since the partnership with Brad Gilbert, I think, began. And I don't know if Coco's current performances have been up to the mark, but it's interesting that she's probably resting. I don't know. America itself is resting a lot of hopes on Coco since the departure of Serena as well. She's got a lot of aura in and around her, even during the press conferences and the way she talks about issues outside the court. Um, but but yeah, it's interesting that you said that Coco is going to live up to the hype. But yeah,
I mean, I find that she's very similar to Yannick Sinner in the fact that she's
yeah,
very mature for her age. She's not emotional. I think these are all very good ingredients. I mean, and she's athletic, very athletic. She's very gifted in that sense. There are a few things that in her game that like I haven't really watched, to be honest, so I can't comment. But every time I look at the statistics, the double fault count is pretty high. So the kind of the serve and the forehand has been her thing, and I think if she takes care of that, I think the work ethic is there. I think the the level headedness is there. So I don't see anything that they can push her out of the top 10 unless she just loses her mind and or just starts spending too much time doing other things other than tennis, and that's a lot of times that can affect someone's career. But with her, I don't get that feeling or that sense. I feel like Zhang might be there, for a few years. So I think a lot of it is a question of motivation, a question of okay, what's your big ultimate goal is, because I think for a lot of players when they get to top 10, it's like, oh well, that's great. Now I can relax, and so I think the Iga, Sabalenka, Rybakina, Coco, they're they're not the players who are happy with this one time result. So they're looking to be consistent. Now a lot more goes into it. You can have the desire, but you might not have the physical capability, or your body might not be able to hold down to it. But typically, if you have these really big goals, you start you start trying to analyze. Okay, what can I do in order to be there for for a longer period, longer than one season, longer than 2 months, and that takes a little bit of analysis and a more methodical approach. And I think that one thing for Coco for sure is that she's very very young. She's I don't think she's even 20 yet. If
yeah, she just turned
she
20.
just turned 20. Okay, so she's barely 20 years old, and she's been on tour already for a few years, and she's been top five. So I only see like if she's making all the right moves and then I don't see why she's not going to be a very serious threat to the top two players. Um, and I think like also if she starts biting at their heels and she starts challenging them and winning and beating them in many matches, then the top players would also start making adjustments, because they start realizing, okay, well, we don't have a lead that big. But if the two of you are always by ahead by a mile in front of everybody else, then it's hard to challenge yourself. Like why do if Sabalenka didn't lose like 4 or 5 matches to Iga in 2000, was it 21? There's no way she'd improve her game. So I think that beating that she was getting from Iga actually helped her to recalibrate and readjust and be like, take a look at her game and try to reevaluate. Okay, what am I doing wrong, or what can I improve? So there are players that and I think that it's good to have that competition, because then they kind of help each other out. Like, if Sabalenka didn't start beating Iga, then Iga would, might still walk around saying like, well, my game is just fine. Like, I don't need to improve anything. But then, she starts losing a few matches here and there, and all of a sudden, she becomes a slightly different player. So they help and push each other. And as long as the motivation is there, I think there's few other girls that I feel like could be doing that. Like Zhang is one of them. Coco is definitely one of them. And then um, I'm sure. Like, I just can't think of who else is in the top 20 right now.
Yeah, obviously, I wanted to talk to you about Naomi Osaka being in there as well because you've got the top three, Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Swiatek holding their positions there. But you spoke about Coco, you spoke about Jessica Pegula maybe slipping down because of her age right now. But Naomi Osaka's return has also been anticipated a lot. Where do you see her in the mix for the rest of the year? And is she going to compete for the bigger ones?
Um, well, first, Jessie, I feel like she'll kind of, the slipping is not also just the age. It's also, she doesn't have, in my opinion, she just doesn't have the big weaponry. She's solid, but she's I kind of like a David Ferrer used to be, like, where he would be solid enough, but some of the top players would just pick his game apart because he just didn't have enough weapons to hurt them. So it's kind of like when you figure out how to play the Pac-Man. If once you figure out the algorithm, it's almost like impossible to lose because you understand that there's a certain limitations of that in that algorithm. And this is where she has to figure out, okay, how can I add a little bit extra to my game? What can I hurt them with? If I can't hurt them with power because it just physically I can't produce enough power, then what is it that I can win with? And this is always kind of the question: is like, where's my edge? What's my advantage? So with Osaka, obviously a powerful player, but the thing is that a lot of times the tour kind of moves on. So you kind of get left behind. So a lot of times, you also, as you're coming back, you also have to kind of improve where from where you were before you stopped. And in that sense, you know, kind of, sometimes it's like, like if you go for a run, and if you run for like 20 minutes and then all of a sudden you stop to drink, all of a sudden to get going is a little bit harder. Like, it's almost easier to just
Yeah.
continue to run. You can slow down a little bit, you can accelerate, but once you kind of fall off that roller coaster, it's kind of hard to get back on it. um, and so again, the question of motivation, the question of fitness, with
Yeah.
Naomi, uh, that might be the big question is, if the motivation is there, if the fitness is there, she'll find a way how to improve, she'll find a way how to get better. But she would have to be a slightly different player than she was 2 years ago, for sure, because these girls have been improving. These girls have been kind of
Yeah.
moving the game a little bit more forward. So she has to move along with the times. And again, I didn't watch any of the matches, so it's hard for me to comment. Um, but mentally, she knows what it takes to get to the top. She's won enough slams so she knows how to deal with the pressure. Um, and now it's just a question. Okay, if she's hungry enough to be up there again, then she'll probably take all the right steps to get there. She'll get into better fitness. She'll make sure that she's improving her game. If it's the nutrition that she needs to look at, then she'll take care of that. But if the motivation is not there, then we just kind of find reasons why we can't move forward.
Well, it was great chatting with you. One last question before I let you go. Any ATP players you would like to, or probably any of the ATP players you would like to coach in the next, I don't know, coming years, or would you like to stick to WTA?
I'm pretty open. I don't. I'm not sticking exclusively with the WTA players. I feel like it's more of that, the image now. Like, oh, he's a He's a women's coach.
Yeah, no, you obviously started off with Alan Karatsev, mentoring him and coaching him. So that's why I
Yeah, I
asked
mean,
that
I
question.
was helping him when I was playing, but I never like really coached, and he never really asked me to coach him. So um, I've had a couple of requests, but the guys were pretty low in the rankings, and so they're not generating any income, and so for me that would be I would either have to almost like sponsor a player because you're not really
Yeah.
giving them money, but you're also not charging them what what you're worth. So so in that sense, sometimes it can get tricky, but um, yeah, I mean, I listen. I like helping, and to me, I don't get picky with am I helping a girl? Am I helping a guy? So I'm not trying to cling on to the WTA. And of course, like I know a lot more WTA players, so I have to watch them for my job. So I understand what's going on there a little bit better now. So I know how the players play. I can sort of see some of the up and coming talent, and um, but listen. I'm sure there's a ton of guys that are looking for help, and that's I think it's kind of it's a weird environment. It's like if you're not in their face, they kind of forget that you even exist. But it's like that with everything nowadays, like, right, like if you don't if someone doesn't put their face out on Instagram, you might not even remember that that person exists, right? So like that's why we have all these status updates in WhatsApp, status update in the
Yeah.
Telegram, Instagram live feed. Like we constantly have to bombard our other people with ourselves in order to be in their minds. And so I feel like as a coach, if you haven't been on tour, then like literally 6 months later, people don't even remember that there's a coach that exists with that name. So it's kind of like, but to be on tour, you have to coach someone. So it's almost like,
I
if
know.
you don't get picked up within
Paradox.
a certain period, then people just kind of forget about your existence. And yeah, so I think the environment has changed. Social environment has changed quite a bit, and
Yeah.
so the young players they don't they either try to hire someone like with a really big name. Like for a while it was fashionable to hire like Landell, Chang, Agassi, Edberg. They were all sort
Yeah.
of working, but of course they can't travel for 40 weeks. They don't want to, or
Yeah.
they cost a lot more. So yeah, so players have to make a lot of times these decisions on how much they can afford and who they can afford for that kind of money. So of course there's different salary um, out there. So yeah, so it has to make financial sense, but also yeah, a lot of times like I think for players it's difficult sometimes because you sort of pay money up front and then you hope that the coach can help you, but the coach can't pick up
Yeah.
the racket and go play for you. They can only tell you what to do, and then sometimes maybe they realize like, oh, but it's the same thing that the other coach was telling me. Like, well, but maybe if Ivan Lendl comes and tells you like, well, you got to hit this ball over the net, it makes a lot more sense than if I say that. And if I say that, then but your dad said that you got to hit over the net. It's like, oh, what do you know? But then if Ivan Lendl comes in, all of a sudden it's like, oh well, you got to hit over the net. Like that seems like a logical thing. So yeah, sometimes you pay for the as a player. Sometimes you pay for the for to save time, because if Ivan Lendl says like he's not going to probably say something stupid because he's been enough on tour to understand what's the most important thing for you to focus on. So if Ivan says, "Listen, you got to hit over the net," then you know that that's very important, and he might save you time. So something that another coach might try to get you to do for 2 months. Ivan would say like, okay, you hit one net one more time. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna go back home and go play golf. And it's like all of a sudden like, okay, fine, I'm gonna hit over the net. So in a way, he got you to do something in one practice, and you did save a bit of money in that sense. because you've done something much quicker. So a lot of times, yeah, someone with experience can have that effect.
Great. This was an amazing talk with you,
Thank you.
and got a lot of information myself, and for the viewers as well. I think it was a very entertaining chat. Um, Best of luck for your endeavors, whomever it is that you're coaching,
Thank you.
and I hope we can have a chat sometime later as well.
Yes. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah. You can.